Hello, I'm the 10-minute English teacher. Let's get you exam ready. Today we're thinking about love and relationships poetry, GCSE English Literature for AQA. And today we're going to be thinking about the poem When We Two Parted by Lord Byron. So before we get started, let's think a little bit about who Lord Byron was. So Lord Byron became Lord Byron when he was 10 years old. His uncle died and he inherited a title and a big estate called Newstead Abbey. That's where he went to live as a young man. He also went to Cambridge where he was educated and he became a very big fan of Shakespeare in his time there. He married somebody called Anne Milbank and he was very famous as a poet at the time in his marriage to her, but he was unfaithful. And his reputation was left in tatters. He went to Europe, and whilst there, he ended up in Greece, and they were at war with the Ottoman Empire, which is now modern Turkey. And he decided that he was going to fight for Greece, and while he was there, he got a fever and died, but was fighting for Greece at the time of his death. So that's the life of Lord Byron. So now we're going to think about the poem. The poem's written by Byron to an unnamed past lover. There were many of them. It's a poem about his feelings about their love affair having come to an end. So a quick reading of the poem and then we'll be analysing it. When We Two Parted by Lord Byron. When we two parted in silence and in tears, half broken hearted to sever for years, pale grew thy cheek and cold, colder thy kiss, truly that hour foretold sorrow to this. The dew of the morning sunk chill on my brow. It felt like that warning of what I feel now. The vows are all now broken, and light is thy fame. I hear thy name spoken and share in its shame. They name thee before me, a knell in mine ear. A shudder comes over me. What wert thou so dear? They know not I knew thee, who knew thee too well. Long, long shall I rue thee, too deeply to tell. In secret we met, in silence I grieve, that thy heart could forget, thy spirit deceive. If I should meet thee after long years, how should I greet thee? With silence and tears. When We Two Parted by Lord Byron. So we're going to think now about how we're going to structure our response to the examination. Your first paragraph in the exam, you'd be writing about two poems, the named poem and one of your choosing. And if it happens to be this poem that you're writing about, your first paragraph is going to tell us how this one and the other one relate to the theme that's named in the question. So you're going to tell us what they're about, the two poems, but be concise. Keep it relatively simple. It's only a couple of sentences about each poem that you need. So here's an example of that. Byron's poem, When We Two Parted, is written to a past lover who Byron had a relationship with in secrecy. In the poem, he considers the feelings they once had for each other and the pain caused by the relationship's end. So it's a poem that explores the negative impact that love can have and how painful relationships ending can be. After that paragraph, so we would have explained what the poem A is about as well as poem B. We then look at structure. So the second paragraph tells us about the structure in each of the poems. So can you make a comment on the rhyme scheme or the metre of each poem? And here's an example of that for Byron's poem. Byron's poem has a semi-irregular metre and an A-B, A-B, C-D, C-D rhyme scheme. So this is effective as it reflects the idea that love can bring certainty or uncertainty to your life, as these two structural effects work in conflict with each other. So you get this sort of sense of certainty from the rhyme scheme, but that's somehow contrasted by this semi-irregular metre. Some lines have more beats than others. So you may have annotated your anthology and thought about every line, but in reality you're only going to be using 4 or 5 quotes from each of your poems. The average 9 in 45 minutes uses around 9 quotes, so you knowing 4 or 5 really well and having some clever things to say about them is definitely what you need to do when it comes to the exam. So these are worth knowing and being able to analyse. In front of you, you've got this flashcard. There's a little bit there about the themes and the structure. I'll leave that to you to explore, and I'll take you now through those 4 quotes. So we've got pale grew thy cheek and cold. Now, I told you earlier that Byron was a big fan of Shakespeare. You could argue that there's an intertextual reference to Romeo and Juliet here. Romeo speaks of the brightness of Juliet's cheek. So we've got this subject's cheek growing pale. So you could say there's an allusion to death here, but it's also got this intertextual reference to Romeo and Juliet. Maybe their relationship was at one point very similar to that of Romeo and Juliet. We've got silence and tears. So that's mentioned in the first stanza, and then we return to that phrase right at the end of the poem. So we've got this cyclic structure, and that really helps to emphasise the idea that love can cause so much pain. To sever for years. That verb sever there is really clever. It's describing the end of their relationship, but it's also reflecting the idea that love can be painful. It also perhaps suggests that the pair belong together and that their breakup has been forceful and physical and violent, that that really they belong together. And hearing her name is a knell in mine ear, according to Byron. Now, knell is the sound made by a funeral bell. Here, Byron's suggesting that hearing his lover's name would be like a knell to him. And that suggests that relationships can cause the same feelings as bereavement. So it's really exploring those strong feelings that love can be responsible for. Okay, so now you need to take your revision a little bit further and make yourself some notes in order to be confident and know this poem well. So here are some key questions. Answer them in full sentences to aid your revision and look back on them at some point, maybe revisit this video. Firstly, who is the speaker and what is their frame of mind in the poem? It's Byron, and what sort of mindset does he have? Explore that. What's the key use of language in the poem and what does it communicate? You should hopefully be able to recognise and remember all 4 of those key quotes that I've shared with you today. What structure does the poem have and what effect does this have? Number 4, what ideas about love does the poem communicate and how? And number 5, what's the context of the poem? Okay, check out the other videos on my channel. I'll continue to add content. Feel free to ask for something you'd like to see me cover in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share and keep revising.